Welcome to your weekly World Climate Change News Report. Our headlines this week are: researchers expect more extremes in wet and dry seasons. NASA predicts more hurricanes and wildfires. Coronavirus and climate change boost humanitarian crisis. Climate action requires systematic decarbonization. Deadly heat waves across Africa. Ventilation corridors to fight high temperatures. And the UNCCD and Azerbaijan join hands for water security. Our first story: researchers expect more extremes in wet and dry seasons. According to a research from Clemson University, climate change will lead to more rainfall as well as more water evaporation. Consequently, dry seasons around the world will become drier and wet seasons will become wetter. The study analyzed annual precipitation and its fluctuations through the seasons for different regions from 1971 through 2000. The data was used to predict future water availability during each region's 3 wettest months and 3 driest months. Our second story: NASA predicts more hurricanes and wildfires. Due to climate change, the world can expect more hurricanes and wildfires in the coming months. Yang Chen of the University of California has stated how climate change is likely to make some areas get drier and more flammable conditions that would allow for fires and deforestation or agricultural use to spread. Unfortunately, NASA's risk models suggest that the areas that were most affected by wildfires in 2019 are most likely to be targeted again. Our third story: coronavirus and climate change boost humanitarian crisis. In a recent statement by the UN Human Rights Council, it has been revealed that nearly 200 million people will require humanitarian assistance by the year 2022 due to the impact of the coronavirus pandemic, exacerbating the climate change crisis. Sexual abuse, insecurity, lack of health care, and displacement due to climate change are some of the causes, with women and girls being at a greater risk. These issues are globally widespread, found from Venezuela to Myanmar. Our fourth story: climate action requires systematic decarbonization. Although Europe has already agreed to ambitious carbon neutrality targets, experts say stricter targets are needed to achieve a 1.5-degree pathway for climate change mitigation. EIT Climate KIC argues that successful climate change mitigation will not be realized within the confines of the existing business landscapes. Rather, systematic change on policy, education, finance, and innovation is needed to enable large-scale decarbonization to occur and secure Europe's position as the global leader on climate action. Our fifth story: deadly heat waves across Africa. Research has shown that the Middle East, South America, and parts of Africa have experienced the biggest increasing trends in frequency, duration, and cumulative heat since the 1950s due to climate change. Climate projections over sub-Saharan Africa suggest that heat waves are set to become even hotter and life-threatening, even if the global average temperature is restricted within 1.5 degrees Celsius. It's also been found that heat-related deaths are underreported, which is putting more lives in danger. Our next story: ventilation corridors to fight high temperatures. To fight climate change-induced high temperatures, Frankfurt decided to create ventilation corridors. These corridors are stretches of land with no buildings or trees to facilitate airflow in the city. The concrete roads absorb heat, and human activity makes the place much hotter. Green roof installation has also been put into place as they help with natural insulation alongside cooling. June 2020 was the hottest month on record, and Frankfurt was one of the hottest cities in Germany. And now for our final story, UNCCD and Azerbaijan join hands for water security. United Nations agencies provide support to mitigate drought and water shortages. Climate change has caused an increase in the average temperature up to 1.4 degrees, accompanied by a reduction of river flow between 2021 and 2050. The Executive Secretary of the UNCCD discussed with the Minister of Ecology and Natural Resources of Azerbaijan discussed the effects of climate change in Azerbaijan. The severe consequences of drought and water insecurity on social and economic development were also mentioned. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for weekly world climate change news updates. Welcome to your weekly World Climate Change News Report. Our headlines this week are: researchers expect more extremes in wet and dry seasons. NASA predicts more hurricanes and wildfires. Coronavirus and climate change boost humanitarian crisis. Climate action requires systematic decarbonization. Deadly heat waves across Africa. Ventilation corridors to fight high temperatures. And the UNCCD and Azerbaijan join hands for water security. Our first story: researchers expect more extremes in wet and dry seasons.
G'day from the Bureau for Sunday, the 19th of July. A cloud band over WA brought widespread rain to the Pilbara overnight, with over 50 millimetres falling at Karratha. This rain will spread further inland across WA today, while in the southeast, a cold front will move through Victoria and Tasmania with showers, local hail and thunder, and even snow down to 800 metres. Unfortunately though, little if any rain will be reaching the farming areas of northern Victoria and southern New South Wales. The cloud band and light rain will move into central Australia on Monday, with showers, gusty winds, local hail and thunder and snow slowly easing in Tasmania and southern parts of Victoria. High pressure will mostly clear the weather from southern states on Tuesday, with only Tasmania and southern parts of Victoria expecting just a few light showers, while the upper trough over central Australia moves into Queensland. And this upper trough will interact with more moisture over eastern Queensland on Wednesday, bringing widespread rain and storms to eastern parts. While further south, inland parts of southeast Australia will have a cold and frosty morning, then a mostly sunny day. A cold front will brush southwest WA on Thursday with showers and gusty winds, while rain and storms in Queensland will move into southeastern parts of Queensland, clearing the central coast there. The front will move through South Australia, Victoria and parts of New South Wales on Friday with showers and possible storms. Moist onshore flow will also increase the showers and storms in southeast Queensland and northeast New South Wales. Elsewhere, high pressure will keep much of the rest of the country dry. Showers and thunderstorms will spread across the rest of New South Wales and southern Queensland on Saturday and mostly clearing offshore on Sunday, while another front will move through southern parts of WA over the weekend. And that's it for our weekly wrap. Keep up to date with the latest official forecasts and we'll see you again next Sunday. G'day from the Bureau for Sunday, the 19th of July. A cloud band over WA brought widespread rain to the Pilbara overnight, with over 50 millimetres falling at Karratha. This rain will spread further inland across WA today, while in the southeast, a cold front will move through Victoria
benefit to us. We've had access to quality seeds which are proving better than what we've been traditionally planting. They are more resistant, and going forward we'll be able to get more knowledge, especially from them, and assistance.
KALRO's technology innovations and the management practices help to contribute to the reduction of production shocks and offer alternative options in the interest of food and nutrition security.
Some of the technologies we use or we have been advancing is drip irrigation, We have been also investing heavily in conservation agriculture and also enhanced soil fertility issues around the farmer, because this is very key to enhance productivity.
Pastoralists who travel long distances in search of pasture and water for their cattle have also been adversely affected by climate change. Receding rangelands threaten the very basis of their livelihoods and the health of their livestock. The Kenyan government, with support from the World Bank, launched the Kenya Livestock Insurance Program to compensate the pastoralists for loss of livestock due to extreme weather.
Under livestock program, we have a thermostable vaccine that is available, and this vaccine can be used in the drier parts of Kenya where refrigeration may not be necessary and the power is a challenge.
In an effort to adapt to the effects of climate change, Kenya is increasingly securing her energy resources. The growth in geothermal and solar power plants is expected to provide more reliable and environmentally sustainable energy.
Kenya is referred as a renewable energy leader because it is generously endowed with that resource. We have enough geothermal resource, enough wind and solar. Secondly, Kenya is ranked 12th in the world in the usage of renewable energy. We are also ranked number 1 in Africa. In terms of geothermal, Kenya is a strong number 9 in the whole world.
Installed capacity for geothermal in KenGen currently stands at 534 megawatts. And it is our dream that we can be able to expand that to at least 1,200 megawatts by 2025.
Strathmore is the first zero carbon footprint university in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. Okay? We settled on 600 kilowatts, which is 0.6 megawatt, the size of the plant. Those are 2,400 panels distributed around 6 buildings of ours here. And it began working on the 24th of June 2014.
The increasing awareness and usage of alternative clean energy sources such as briquettes, biogas and clean cook stoves has helped to greatly cut down on the harmful carbon emission to the environment. As the country's population grows, so does consumption. Every day, tons of solid waste are disposed of at various landfills. However, with the replacement of open landfills with sanitary landfills and recycling of waste into clean fuel,
we in the metropolitan development, through the funding of the World Bank, we are developing the first sanitary landfill in the country. Once we do this, it will be like a good example which can be replicated in other urban areas.
With a population of close to 50 million people and growing, the impact of climate change on livelihoods in Kenya cannot be wished away. It is therefore paramount to sensitize our population because we all have a collective responsibility. Our journey to green growth is therefore indeed the pathway for sustainable development, economic stability, and prosperity for every last one of us.
Locals say it's the longest drought in living memory. Parts of Australia's eastern outback have not seen proper rainfall for years. It's crippling rural communities here in New South Wales.
When you get to this level of, I suppose, despair is a big word, but sometimes that's how you feel. Sometimes.
Some have had to kill off livestock. Others sell up and move on. Third-generation farmer Gordon Newman says the dry spell is devastating family businesses.
But it's mum, dad and the kids. I'm very, very concerned about them. That's got to be looked after. That's the very backbone of our community, and they're failing to represent them. It's the big companies, they'll sell out, buy back in.
Droughts are synonymous with Australia's outback, but researchers say climate change is making things worse. An early start to the bushfire season has seen swathes of land in eastern Australia torched in recent weeks. The dry spell is threatening major disaster for a number of towns, where households are restricted as to the amount of water they can use. Over the border in Queensland State, distributors say residents who rely on tanks are buying water at record levels.
I mean, I watch the radar on the Weather Channel, and I've seen patches of rain either go below us or above us. I've even seen big patches head straight for us, and I think beauty, it's going to hit us, but it just splits before us, you know. So we just have to wait and see.
This dam is supplying one of the largest communities in the hardest hit region. It's just 20% full and will be out of water by Christmas.
And we're now going through, periods of the driest months, the longest periods without rain, the hottest months on record. That's the sort of situation that we're in right now.
With no relief in sight, harsher dry spells down under are scarring outback landscapes and tearing at the fabric of rural life like never before.
Hello from the Bureau of Meteorology. I'm climatologist Lynette Bedio.
And I'm hydrologist Robert Pipinich. We're here to discuss the August to October climate and water outlook. Lynette, it's been a pretty wet start to the year, although fairly dry June. How are the climate drivers looking?
So we're seeing those cooler temperatures in the tropical Pacific. Once we get past certain levels, it's indicative of a La Nina event. We're not quite there yet, but the Bureau is at a La Nina watch, which means that there's double the normal chance of a La Nina event occurring. So a La Nina event usually brings wetter than average conditions over Australia. And as you said, we have had a wetter start to the year. So looking at that 6-month map there, last time we spoke, we had those wetter conditions leading into winter. So we have had a dry June, but still overall we're seeing wetter than average conditions in some parts. And with the wetter July, we're hoping that this will continue. So how's this impacted on the soil moisture?
Yeah, so looking at the soil moisture map for June, we can see that the southeast corner of the country is still relatively wet with around average to above average soil moisture conditions. That's come off a little bit in June from very wet conditions in May. Then looking across to the south of the country and the southwest corner, we see very dry soils there. So the catchments there are very dry and minimal runoff would be generated there with any rainfall. So given the possibility of the La Nina, what's the rainfall outlook like?
We are seeing that increased chance of above average rainfall across much of Australia, especially in the east there, but parts of southwest WA which have been very dry recently. So really hoping for that rainfall to really continue that recovery from those really dry drought conditions that we saw last year. How's this looking for stream flow?
Yeah, so the stream flow for our July to September outlook, we're seeing around 2/3 of locations likely to be low or near median. The low flows include a concentration in the southwest. That's in line with the dry catchments we saw in the soil moisture map earlier. Going across to the southeast, that's where we're seeing most of the near median and high flows concentrated. Again, in line with a sort of near average to above average soil moisture conditions there. Looking up at the north, we're seeing a lot of high concentration of that new normal flow category there. And that's indicative of the dry season, given that that category represents very low flows where there's a roughly equal chance of representing either of the three low or near median or high category. So looking ahead to the temperature outlook, how's that looking?
Yeah, thanks. We're seeing increased chances of above average daytime temperatures across much of the northern part of Australia and into the far southeast there. Nighttime temperatures, increased chances of above average nighttime temperatures across much of the country, though it is still winter, so we're still going to get those cold nights.
Of course, yeah. Okay, thanks Lynette. That's it from us for now. Join us again for our climate and water conversation.
Planet series, launched on Netflix in April 2019. In just the first month, it was
While I've
watched
been
in over
stuck
25
inside, I've been
million
spending a lot of time
homes around
thinking
the
about
world.
what makes all of
And is already Netflix's most successful documentary series ever produced. It was the first series of its kind to carry an important conservation message at its heart. It set out to showcase the wonder and variety of life on Earth and reveal why
we live in a world
this
where
biodiversity
globalization and
is so
trade have
important
become one
to
of
the
the
health
most
of the
vital
planet.
aspects in determining the
The
power
Our Planet
of
team
a country's
are
economy.
carrying this
in fact, the
message.
process of
How does
getting
my home
goods
stay
from
warm?
point
Where
A
does
to point
this electricity
B
come
might be
from?
one of
Why is my dog so heckin' cute? How do the systems that support my internet connection and comfort impact the climate system? These are big questions, so I'm going to start by just taking a tiny portion of that and looking at an often overlooked source of renewable energy and heating,
It's a story
geothermal and
that
geoexchange.
needs to know.
Now, as a heads up, a portion of this video has been supported by the
future of humanity.
Most people understand that a changing climate is a threat to our future survival. But few know.
And little. Big, we're talking geothermal power plants, industrial scale systems designed to pump out electricity for millions of people. Apparently people in the biz call these HOROCs. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we've got the smaller scale residential systems that are referred to as geoexchange or geothermal heat pump systems. Both of these systems work on roughly the same principle, that the temperatures below our feet are consistent throughout the year, unlike the atmosphere, which likes to mix it up a bit too much. But beyond the whole geo equals earth, thermal equals heat thing, these two types of systems are pretty different. I'm gonna dig into both types of geothermal in this video, but let's start with the big ones. The deeper underground you go, the warmer it gets. The center of the planet is the same temperature as the surface of the sun. The deepest hole we've ever dug into the earth was 12 kilometers, which isn't even 1% of the way to the center, but still it was as hot as an oven. So hot we had to stop digging. So here's a question. In a time where we're desperate for non-carbon emitting energy sources, why aren't we using the heat beneath our feet? With the right geology, chemistry, and drilled wells, you can send water down to where it is warm, heat it up with all that geothermal heat, then pump the water back to the surface, nice and toasty, make some steam, and spin a turbine. Geothermal power is generated in a pretty similar way to other types of thermal generation. Thermal generation is just a fancy word for boiling some water and spinning a turbine. At a gas power plant, you burn gas to boil water to create steam that spins a turbine. At a coal power plant, you burn coal to boil water to create steam to spin a turbine. A nuclear plant? A little more complicated, but same deal. You do some fission, which boils a liquid to create steam to spin a turbine. Geothermal says, what if instead of burning anything, we just look down there? One of the big things that makes geothermal different from other renewables, it isn't variable. The temperatures downstairs does not change, so it can provide baseload power in ways that solar and wind can't. You need pretty specific geology to make this kind of power generation work, and drilling holes into the ground that deep is wicked expensive. So in a lot of places, despite the Earth's heat being free, the upfront costs are too high to compete with other cheaper forms of generating power. So right now it's estimated that only 6 to 7% of the world's potential geothermal power has been tapped. Although some folks I spoke with said some of the lowest hanging fruit, the easiest and cheapest geothermal fields to take advantage of are already being used, so ramping up production is technologically and monetarily difficult. Historically, in the US and North America, geothermal hasn't gotten a lot of love from the big environmental groups because of its connection with oil and gas. While geothermal is a renewable source of power, the tools and technologies and expertise to drill deep into the Earth's surface come from the oil industry that got good at this stuff looking for oil and fracking. Oil companies have also used geothermal to pretend like they cared about the planet, then dumped the projects. Looking at you, Chevron. The flip side of that, geothermal faces a lot of competition from the oil and gas industry when trying to recruit workers and getting the tech to drill and build these systems. That being said, Project Drawdown, the big book on climate solutions, says geothermal power has the potential to reduce global carbon dioxide emissions by 6.19 to 9.85 gigatons, which is quite a bit, but comes with a hefty initial price tag of over $80 billion. However, once the holes are drilled and the system is running, geothermal is basically free, and Project Drawdown estimates a lifetime net savings around $1 trillion. So that's your crash course in large-scale geothermal power production. But let's bring the temperature down and talk about geothermal exchange systems. These don't need super hot rocks by volcanoes to function. I spoke with Ryan Docherty from the Geothermal Exchange Organization about the potential for residential geothermal, especially in the United States.
Unlike high-temperature geothermal energy production, this is a 50-state technology, and it's installed in every state. The Cold Climate Research Center in Fairbanks, Alaska, is on a geothermal heat pump. Where I'm at in Springfield, Illinois, Abraham Lincoln's tomb is on a geothermal system. The gift shop at the Statue of Liberty, St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan, state capitals of Colorado, Oklahoma, and Michigan. On and on and on. There's IKEAs in Kansas City and in Denver that are 100,000+ square foot big box stores that are on geothermal systems. Our assessment is that there are probably a little over 1 million of these systems in operation. And the Department of Energy calculated that there are the equivalent of 2 million US homes on geothermal. Their vision for the future of this technology is to see it deployed in the equivalent of 28 million homes by 2050. So a 14-fold increase in the next 30 years, which we are going to do our darndest to make happen. In my mind, this isn't optional. It's something we have to do. The question is, how fast can we get there?
The reason these geothermal heat pump systems work from New York City to rural Indiana to the suburb in your favorite TV show is because a few feet underground, the temperature is between 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit all the time. Essentially, a geothermal system transfers heat to or from the ground. In the winter, when the ground is generally warmer than the air, it pulls heat into the home. And in the summer, it can take the heat from the home and store it in the ground in exchange for the cooler subsurface temps. This is done with a series of pipes either laid horizontally or vertically underground, often called a ground loop. That's connected to a geothermal heat pump. The tech in a heat pump isn't that different from a refrigerator or an air conditioner, which basically just moves hot air around. The elegant solution that geothermal offers with this unlimited supply of 50-degree Fahrenheit heat just a few feet underground is that it is way more efficient. It is a lot easier to heat only 20 degrees, from 50 to a more comfortable 70, than it is to try to warm up the chilly outside air. Now, if you're like me and you never put too much thought into the big boiler in the basement or how your radiators work, or in my case, don't, the joys of living in New York City, you might be curious how this is any different from what a lot of homes have. I don't want to spend the extra brain cells to figure out a fossil fuel thing because I don't have to. What if we just call my dad and have him explain it? Cool? Cool.
Hello, Miriam.
Hi, Dad. Can I make you tell me about how we heat our house?
Well, first we plant the seeds for the tree, and then we wait a couple billion years for the oil.
What if you speed it up a little bit more?
So we have two heating systems. We have our original heating system, which is oil cooks water in a boiler, and boiling water is sent through radiators throughout the house. But we added a split system, which is based on electricity, where the unit is mostly outside.
Why didn't you get a geothermal one instead of an outside air compressor?
Because we're on a hill filled with lots of mountains.
Talk to you later.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
So yeah, where I grew up, we had a big truck show up twice a year and pour a highly flammable gas into a steel drum. We then burn that gas in our home to stay warm. And this is apparently totally normal, but there are serious health ramifications. Indoor air pollution is a big deal. And then there are the carbon emissions. While transportation and energy generation get a lot of screen time because of their emissions, home and buildings, especially the heating and cooling of those buildings, is a huge generator of emissions. Geothermal heat pump systems fix that. They rely on this free, basically thermal battery below our feet. And while they do require electricity, they are by far the greenest home heating and cooling solution out there. So why doesn't everyone have one of these? Simple answer, they're expensive, and most people don't even know about geothermal. It's kind of like solar 10 or 15 years ago. The only people who even really knew about solar panels are engineers that want to tinker, really rich environmentalists, and people that just want to be completely off-grid. Even now, residential solar is not as widespread as it could be because it's still pretty expensive for most people. And unfortunately, unlike a solar panel, you don't get the same visual marketing. A house with a geothermal system looks no different than one with a gas boiler. But like solar, prices are coming down and governments and utilities are offering tax incentives and rebates. In a lot of places, installing a geothermal system can pay for itself in just a few years. And if you're building something new, the difference in cost is basically negligible. Reducing carbon emissions requires getting rid of fossil fuels. That needs to be done in 3 ways, which fortunately can all happen at the same time. 1. Clean up energy production. No more coal and gas making electricity. 2. Electrify everything that requires fossil fuels. And 3. Reduce electricity consumption. Geothermal can play a part in each and every one of those stages. Large-scale industrial geothermal power generation can provide necessary baseload power, and geothermal heat pump systems can reduce energy demand and electrify heating and cooling of buildings. There isn't a world where global carbon emissions go down without seriously addressing the emissions from heating and cooling homes and buildings. Right now, geothermal is probably the best solution to do that. And in the future, geothermal systems are gonna get really cool. Some already are, depending on the definition of cool. The same concept that is used to heat and cool an individual home can be used for massive buildings, but it can also be networked. Imagine taking all the excess heat produced by trying to keep things cool in a supermarket and using that to heat your home. Right now, all that heat just gets vented off their roof. Incorporating geothermal into urban and suburban and even rural planning is going to need to be a major component